On today's show, there was one area of the basketball court in which the Hawks were blown out on Thursday evening, and beyond that, it was pretty good, but there was one spot where they couldn't really overcome things. We'll get into all of what transpired in Phoenix and much more, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1679 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening. I guess it's now Friday morning, deep into the morning at this point in time. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. The place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code LockedOnNBA for some deposit match up to $100. Also, I should encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks podcast. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify, as well as YouTube and all of the audio platforms that you might be enjoying in the podcast space. And today's podcast will focus on what became a loss for the Hawks on the road in Phoenix, 128-115. And it was a valiant effort for Atlanta. We'll get into all of kind of the nuance around this, but the Hawks are still very short-handed at this point in time, and they were big-time underdogs in this game. It was their last game of about a 10-day, 5-game road trip to the West Coast. Always a tough spot for any team, even at full health, and the Hawks are not at full health right now, but they did lose their 5th game in the last 6. They finished 1-4 on the road trip. There were some bright spots in this game. They led by as many as 14 points in the first half. They were down to 5 at halftime, and then they were in the game the entire second half. In fact, they led a few times, albeit briefly, and they were really still competitive until like 3 minutes to go. They were really right there for the most part, but Phoenix just kept making shots the entire game. And that was kind of the biggest difference in this one. Just for some context here, there were 7 guys out of the lineup for the Hawks due to injury in this game, including, and I would say headlined by, Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. I will give a more thorough update on the injury stuff later on in the podcast, because there was some more official injury report updates on Johnson and AJ Griffin, Kobe Buffkin, that we'll touch on later on in the podcast. Phoenix was on the back-to-back in this game. They played last night actually at home against the Sixers. And they were missing some supporting guys, but at the same time, Phoenix was actually having all of their big guns were available. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, etc. Those guys were all available, whereas the Hawks were missing 2 of their best 3 players, plus more, in this game. So all that said, even on the back-to-back for Phoenix, the Hawks were 9.5-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel, in this game. And that felt like it was a pretty appropriate number based on the way this game transpired. Phoenix was the better team, but it wasn't necessarily a blowout at any point in this one. And, at the end, it was very much in doubt on the point spread side of things. But really, I sort of teased it earlier, but this game came down to really one thing in a lot of ways. It's never one thing, but certainly big picture, it was the shooting variance on both sides. So we'll touch on that more as we get going here, but it was really clear as day what the big gap was in this contest, and it was essentially the shooting. Atlanta's defense couldn't hold up in this game. I will say this now and probably again later on. The Hawks did play better defensively than the results will indicate. They didn't play great, but they were better than numbers probably. But Phoenix was just unconscious. A 133 defensive rating in this game for the Hawks, something in that range. The Suns shot a very normal 2-point percentage in this game. 57% is pretty good, but nothing crazy. But the headliner of the entire night was that Phoenix was 22 of 41 from 3-point range. That's a tidy 54% on huge volume. The 22 threes tie for the most the Hawks have allowed all season long, and they also gave up a better percentage in this game to Phoenix than they had in previous games. So effectively, it was the best 3-point shooting game that any team has had against the Hawks all year long in 69 games. So that's one way to put how impressive it was from Phoenix in this game. So in some ways, the game kind of begins and ends right there. There was more nuance around it. The Hawks did allow a bunch of free throw attempts in this game, 27 of those. That's more than you would like to. But they did force 17 turnovers. That's a very good number. They did a good job on the defensive glass in this game. They didn't get run on a ton on the fast break side of things. But Phoenix just has really good shot makers, and they made a lot of shots in this game. They actually held Kevin Durant well below his norm in this game. Mostly DeAndre Hunter, but everybody kind of team effort-wise there on Durant. Devin Booker had some foul trouble. He was actually pretty good in this game, but it was essentially the bench swing that won this game for Phoenix. Eric Gordon was great off the bench. Royce O'Neal were off the bench for Phoenix in this game. And Atlanta's bench was not particularly potent in this contest. As a bridge to the offense, I will say this. The Hawks absolutely and utterly dominated the possession battle in a good direction in this game. To the point where it's actually kind of crazy that they lost this game by 13 points. So the Hawks took 17 more shots from the field than the Suns. Stop right there. If you take 17 more shots than your opponent, you're supposed to win the game, broadly speaking. Doesn't mean you always win, but you're supposed to. If all you knew is that, you would say, obviously the Hawks are going to win this game more often than not. They also took more free throw attempts than the Suns did. And they still lost by 13 points. So again, normally you're going to win if that's going to happen most of the time. And the Hawks had a 120 or so offensive rating in this game. That is good enough to win more often than not. And the Hawks didn't even shoot it that badly. That's also important to note here. They didn't shoot it very well in this game. 44% from the field, 34% from three, and 79% from the free throw line is below average for sure, but it's not like comically bad. But Phoenix was insanely hot, and that gap led to the scoreboard difference. The Hawks won the turnover battle by 6 in this game. The Hawks won the rebounding battle decisively in this one, and they had 30 second chance points. That's a crazy high number of second chance points in a single game. They had 21 fast break points in the game to the Hawks. But it wasn't enough defensively, and the Hawks had a couple of cold spells on offense that ended up costing them throughout this game. Dejounte had a big game, a near triple-double for Murray in this one. They had 7 guys with at least 8 points or more. The Hawks played pretty well, I thought, in this game, especially when you account for all of their absences, the challenge with the roster, only having one forward that you love, basically, at this point in time. No Trey, no Jalen, no Sadiq. Those are 3 of their top 7 players. On the road, exhausted, I'm sure, after a long trip, both in miles and days. To come out there and be competitive in this game, like, I know there'll be a segment of the fan base that thinks that this is kind of just being too nice about it, but in general, I get more pushback for being too positive when they lose and too negative when they win, because I'm trying to give you the nuanced picture of this. And yes, the Hawks lost this game, but one more time, they were 9.5-point underdogs in this game, which is one of their 3 or 4 biggest point spreads of the entire year on the negative side. So they're quote-unquote supposed to lose the game. They're not the more talented team. Phoenix makes more than half their threes on huge volume, and the Hawks are still in the game. That, to me, tells me that the Hawks played fairly well in this game. They just didn't make the same amount of shots as Phoenix did. And the margins, you can't ask for more. I mean, if you just said simulate this game 100 times with only the shot attempts that you saw, the Hawks would win a lot. They would win every time. They obviously lost this game by 13 points, but the variance on shooting was really the entire story in this game. And we'll talk about more about kind of on how it got there throughout this contest in a second. But yeah, it's kind of simple in some respects. It's not always that way, but one team shot the heck out of the ball in this game, and that was the Suns. And yes, granted, part of that's defensive resistance or lack thereof. But in the NBA, shot making can also overcome defense in a lot of ways. It happens regularly in the NBA. But one team made all their shots, shot the ball incredibly well. The other team was below average in shooting, and shooting is the most important of the 4 factors. Basically, the 4 factors are shooting, rebounding, turnover battle, and free throw attempts. Shooting is the most important one of those. And if you lose that one by a lot, you're going to lose the game. That happened in here for the Hawks, and we'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll have more on this game coming up. But first, a word from our friends at PrizePicks. Demons and Goblins are the most exciting way and the newest way as well to play at PrizePicks. Squaresmark Red Demons or Green Goblins give you different payouts at PrizePicks. You win up to 100 times the money on which as little as just 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. If you want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players as well, like rapper Meek Mill or comedian Andrew Schultz, you can find them now in the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of your biggest names in the PrizePicks community each and every week. They also offer injury insurance at PrizePicks, so the entries that you have in play actually can stay in play even if one of your players happens to get injured. It's also really simple to play PrizePicks. I can make my picks and submit my entries in just a minute or less. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of stat types and players that you can't find anywhere else. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports option on the market. I've been playing there for quite some time now. I really enjoy diving into all the stuff, especially in the basketball world, both pro and college. And the place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA when you get there for a first-time deposit match up to $100. One more time, the place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. This segment is brought to you by folks at BetterHelp. sometimes make sure you need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can actually start to get to you if you let them. It's more lets this stuff out, especially as someone who is unbiased on your life. And today I want to tell you about something that maybe for a few of you, you might understand in a similar space, but you might understand this overall. And if not, I understand that as well. But I have some unease, let's say, about the media industry right now. I'm, of course, in the media, and lots of layoffs happening around the world right now, basically in the media space. I'm not talking about the Hawks stuff. I'm just talking about whether there'll be jobs available, whether the work that I do will actually be able to keep continuing how it is now. Of course, not the most intense thing or the most life-altering topic for a lot of people, but therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us, including me, have bigger stuff to fry than that. But media stuff is important to me, and also it's important, generally speaking, to get stuff off your chest every once in a while. If you think about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try right now today. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule, and the place to go is betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. Get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. The place to go is betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. One more time, the place to go is BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, to the game flow in this one, and the Hawks actually started DeAndre Hunter, which is always something people have been calling for a while now. Personally, I'm not the biggest person who cares about this kind of stuff, but Hunter had not started a game since December. They have tried not to start him since he came back, but without Bay and Johnson both at this point in time, it became too much. They had to have somebody guard Kevin Durant, for instance, and Hunter got the nod in that area. He played fine in this game. We'll talk about it later on. Some pretty good shot making early on for both teams, actually. But the Hawks actually had the hot start in this one. They had a 12-0 run to go up by 25-11 in the first several minutes. The Hawks scored 25 points on their first 12 possessions of the game. So on one hand, you could say from that point forward, they were pretty mediocre offensively, but they were incredibly hot at the beginning of this game. They made 5 of the first 7 threes. They assisted on their first 10 baskets in this game. Dejounte had it going early on. It was a hot start, let's just say, for Hawks. Again, up by 14 points in the first quarter. Rotationally, it was the same kind of 10 guys you might expect. Only one guy who was active did not play, and that was Dylan Windler in this game. Bruno only played one stint, and it was in the first half, but Garrison Matthews, Okongwu, Trent Forrest, and Wes Matthews rounded up the rotation. Dejounte played the first 9 minutes and had 16 points and 3 assists in the first 9 minutes of the game. So he was also scorching hot at the outset. And the Hawks were actually up by 7 at the end of the first quarter, despite a nice little run by Phoenix at the end of the quarter. Defensively, it wasn't great, but they did force 6 turnovers in the first quarter, so they were in good shape. Of course, as soon as the second quarter started, that lead was basically gone. A 7-0 run right away by Phoenix to kind of tie the game. It was a 14-point swing in about 5 minutes of game time. And overall, it was a 33-10 run by Phoenix to kind of go from Hawks up 14 to Hawks down 9 in about, 8 minutes, something like that. The Hawks scored 37 points in the first quarter, which is, of course, awesome. In the first 7.5 minutes of the second quarter, they scored 6 points. So the breaks were thrown at that point in time. They couldn't get anything going at that point. Essentially, 2 quarters in this game, first and third, the Hawks did a lot of good things on offense. And the second and fourth quarters, not so much. They did a good job bouncing back, I thought, actually, late in the first half, though. They were down by only 1 late in that half, and down only 5 at halftime, despite that little wobble in the middle. Phoenix, again, as they did the whole game, shot it incredibly well, but the Hawks were winning on the margins, as they did all night long, and they held Durant in check, but it wasn't quite enough to kind of take the lead. And again, the Hawks led very briefly in the second half, but it was mostly Phoenix in control. Early on in the third quarter, though, a couple of nice offensive possessions I thought that I wanted to flag now. Bogey had a picture-perfect catch-and-shoot off a pin down on a curl. That was nice to see. Veet had a nice drive and finish through the lane. They went up by 1 point, actually, mid-quarter after KD had a 3 wiped off of the scoreboard on replay because of a stepping out of bounds. Actually, if you saw this on the broadcast, Trae Young, who is, of course, in street clothes, was first to catch it, at least that I saw on the broadcast. He was all over the fact that KD was out of bounds. That was a nice little call by him off the bench. Also, Devin Booker, Phoenix's other star player, was called for his 5th foul with 5.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. Pretty, you don't have to see that from a star player. Phoenix challenged the play, but lost. He sat for a long time. That opened the door a little bit for the Hawks. In fact, they were kind of right there, but a couple of runs by Phoenix kind of late in the quarter, and the Hawks were still down by 3 going to the fourth. The other big run in the fourth quarter actually happened. It was a 10-0 run. The Hawks had 4 trips in a row where they did not score a point, and Phoenix scored 10 points in about 2.5 minutes to go up by 14 with 8 minutes to go. Now, you're not dead down 14 with 8 minutes to go, but it's a tough spot for probably the inferior team talent-wise on the road down 14. But they actually had a couple of breaks from that point forward to kind of get back into the game. So the Suns fouled 2 different three-point shooters in less than a minute right after that. The second one was Kevin Durant fouling, and it actually became a flagrant 1 foul. So the Hawks got possession too. So they basically had 2 sets of free throws from three-point range plus an extra possession. And that kind of allowed them in totality to get the lead down from 14 to 7. That's a huge swing when you're trying to cut the lead down that fast. And they had it down to 5 2 different times with the ball. And they didn't score from that point forward. So it was kind of in there, they were in the mix, let's say. Dejounte got an offensive foul with about 3.5 minutes to go when he caught Beal in the face trying to clear out space. That was a flagrant 1, upgraded 2, which gave the Suns 2 shots on the ball. That kind of hurt them. They avoided actually a dagger when KD missed a wide open 3 that would probably end the game, but that only kind of put it off a little bit longer. The final dagger for me was a 3 by Booker with about a minute to go to put the Hawks down by 12. It was probably already over, but at that point it was like academically over at that stage. So yeah, it was competitive. It was never out of hand. The Hawks were right in the game until single digits until 2 minutes to go. So, what are you going to do? I talked about a lot of the numbers earlier on in the podcast about the offense being pretty good in this game, and it was. But in the fourth quarter, things kind of screeched to a halt. So they only scored 22 points in the fourth quarter, and that's with getting to the line 13 times. That's not good. So they were 5 of 18 from the field and 1 of 8 from the 3 in the fourth quarter, plus some turnovers. So they just couldn't get anything going offensively. That's been a theme, especially in the non-Trey stretch here. The Hawks have had some nice quarters, maybe even a good half, since on offense without Trey, without Jalen. It's not just Trey either, without Sadiq. And so they haven't been able to put it together for full games very often on offense. And when things bogged down in fourth quarters, the Suns, I think smartly, Dejounte had been red hot at the beginning of the game. And I think the Suns did what a lot of teams will do and have done against Dejounte with Trey out. And that's just they start doubling him, basically. Sending more attention to him, making him kind of be a passer and facilitator. He did that job fine in this game, but they didn't have anybody else to create shots. Bogey obviously can do that a little bit. But once they figured out that Dejounte was kind of their only option as the primary in this game, the Suns did a good job on him, and that changed the game sort of a little bit more. So fourth quarter was pretty rough offensively, and that allowed Phoenix to kind of put the game away in the end. But like I said before, I thought a pretty valiant effort from Atlanta in this game, given all their constraints personnel-wise, and the fact that, once again, Phoenix shot the heck out of the ball to the point where, I don't care in the NBA, how bad, quote-unquote, your defense is. I'm sure people are going to point this out. Yes, part of this is the Hawks' defense. But if you watch this game back and look at the shot quality and compare it to the normal baseline, Phoenix shot above their heads in this game. Even if you want to say, okay, the Hawks would have allowed 4 or 5 less threes, and that would still be a heck of a percentage, in the mid-40s. It's still really, really, really good. Phoenix made probably 4 or 5 more than you would expect. And that is the difference in the game in a lot of ways. So we'll leave it there for now. I'll touch on the player stuff coming up in a second. If you're a new listener, what we do at the end of the podcast, talk all about the players, each and every one, and how they fared in this game. Before we get to that, though, a word from our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what bring home the winning trophy, and it's also what brings your ride or die up to where it normally would be and keeps it alive. eBay Motors has everything you're looking for to maintain your vehicle leveled up to peak performance. They have superchargers, they have roof racks, they have exhaust kits, they have LED headlights, and really everything you're looking for, whether you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered across the board. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, and you will always, always, always find exactly what you're looking for at eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts also guaranteed to fit your ride every time and the first time, or your money is coming back to you. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, and crucially, you are not burning cash at all. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win that you're seeking. Keep your ride or die alive right now at ebaymotors.com. One more time, the place to go is ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, and before we dive into the actual player stuff from this game, some injury updates that I wanted to save to the end, not leave with this necessarily, but 3 guys got official injury updates as of Friday. The headliner is Jalen Johnson, who, of course, returned to the Hawks earlier this week after a 3-game absence due to a right ankle sprain. And then he re-injured the ankle on Monday against the Lakers in the fourth quarter. I talked about that extensively on the show earlier this week. He was probably in the game a little bit too long at the end of the game, but in the end, it was kind of just a fluke play. He turns the ankle. The Hawks announced on Thursday that Johnson has a, quote, preliminary diagnosis, end quote, of a right ankle sprain. There's no indication of like if he had an MRI or not necessarily, but he'll be reevaluated again in 1 week, according to the Hawks. So if you follow that timetable for reevaluation, not return, reevaluation, that would take him out for 4 games at least. And that includes tonight's game, so 3 more games after this. But again, reevaluation does not mean return. He could be out for longer than that. Ankle sprains are tricky. I will always say that. So unfortunately, Jalen is now ruled out of awards contention. I don't know if he was going to be actually a finalist anyway, although he probably should have been, in my opinion, if he'd have been eligible for most improved player, but now that's off the table. But more importantly, obviously, he's been a big part of their current team, big part of their future, and hopefully the best for the ankle moving forward. It's just an ankle sprain. That's not the worst thing in the world, but he'll be out for a little while longer, at least a week at this point in time. Kobe Buffkin is, quote, making progress in his rehab from a left toe sprain, but he won't be reevaluated again for another 7 to 10 days as well. That's kind of a non-update on Buffkin, but he's going to be out for a little while longer. AJ Griffin now has a high ankle sprain officially on his right ankle. He missed a bunch of time in College Park. He's also going to be out for the next 7-10 days before reevaluation as well. So the Hawks have been using that 7-10 day marker a lot this year. It's been kind of a standard reevaluation timeline, so it's kind of vague on purpose, I think, from the Hawks. But at the very least, they'll have those 3 guys out for another week plus. They're missing Trae Young still, and by the way, Trae's reevaluation timeline was supposed to be 4 weeks from the surgery. That could be in the next couple of days. I would say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday range is like the 4-week-ish mark. That doesn't mean they're going to announce any updates at that point in time, but that's the first time that we'll get any more information on Trae Young, potentially, is in the next 3 or 4 days. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, Bay's out for the year. Mogay's still out. Lundy's still out. So lots and lots and lots of injuries. The Hawks were basically with only having one of their normal forwards in this game, in DeAndre Hunter. And tough sledding, obviously, from a roster perspective, because I don't mean to be mean or negative, but if you only had the available roster you had tonight, if you were the Hawks, you would be a pretty bad basketball team. That's the reality of the situation. So there you go. Okay, to the player stuff in this game. A huge split between the starters and the bench in this one. Only Bogey, actually, who has usually the best plus minus, only Bogey had a bad plus minus for starters, but the bench got kind of rocked. So Bruno played 4 minutes, 4 points, -6 in his minutes, only 1 stint in the first half, never played in the second half. He was fine, but didn't do much of anything of note, I didn't think. Okongwu was better in the second half than the first half, but 8 points, 3 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block for Okongwu, and also had 4 fouls, 19 minutes. Looked fine. They have not tried him yet at the 4. I think that they might do that in certain matchups, but Phoenix is probably a pretty small team to be doing that against, so keep that in mind as well. But with Jalen out for a while, they might want to try Okongwu with Capella at some point. Wes Matthews, 1 of 2 from 3, 3 points, 3 fouls. He had to play just out of necessity because they had to play somebody else out there. He's obviously not going to give you a ton on offense right now, but he was fine in his role. Garrison had 9 points, 2 assists, a steal. Defensively had some rough moments, I thought, in this one. Offensively was fine, gave him a good threat. He had to be guarded the whole game, which was certainly helpful. And then Trent Forrest, 2 points, 4 assists, a steal. Not Trent's best defensive game, actually. I mean, he was not terrible there, but he usually is better than I thought than he was tonight defensively. But the 4 assists are very nice. He moved the ball well. Played a little bit with Dejounte, about 2-3 minutes in this game. The rest of it was just with Dejounte off the floor, and he ran the offense, basically. To the starters. Beat Krejci, 38 minutes for Beat Krejci. That's a lot of time for Beat Krejci, but I get why. 9 points, 4 assists, had a steal, only took 9 shots from the field, but 5 from 3, 1 of 5 from 3. He was 3 of 4 on 2s. You know, the shooting is still what it is. It's a question mark, but defensively, I thought he played well. He had good passing, good kind of playmaking in this game. I thought he gave him good minutes. Not flashy necessarily, but certainly doing his job. And he's been thrust into this huge role that he's not really prepared for probably, but playing a lot of minutes and kind of holding it down for the Hawks on the wing right now out of necessity. Capella had 13 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks. Here's a crazy stat for you. Clint Capella was a plus 12 in a 13-point loss. Yeah. Obviously, that's not all on him. That's pretty silly. But he did play well, I think, in this game. He earned the plus 12, I thought. At least he was mostly positive in this one. He outplayed Nurkic on the floor together. It was that Eubanks played well for Phoenix off the bench, and the bench numbers in general were pretty rough. But Clint continues to play pretty well, I think, in recent days. Bogey had 16 points in 36 minutes. He was 2 of 6 on 2s, but 4 of 7 from 3. 3 assists. I mentioned Bogey last night on the show. By the way, if you missed that episode, it's still mostly relevant now. I would say it was kind of a mailbag / season reset, NBA draft stuff, all of that. But I mentioned on that show, Bogey, I think, should be a bigger candidate for Sixth Man of the Year, and I think that still applies after tonight. So keep that in mind. Listen to that podcast as well that I recorded on Wednesday into Thursday. DeAndre Hunter, 22 points on 5-13 from the floor, 3 of 7 from 3, got to the line 10 times. That's a nice sign for DeAndre. 4 rebounds, 2 steals. He's playing well still. I think he did a good job on Durant in this game defensively. He wasn't like uber elite, but I think he played well, and good to see him get a start, play a lot of minutes, and look good doing it. And then Dejounte, I thought was pretty good. 29 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds. Like, obviously, that's great numbers. 4 steals. He was only 8 of 16 on 2, which isn't like great or terrible. 3 of 10 from 3. So he's actually a little bit below water efficiency-wise in this game. But obviously, the 10 assists speak for themselves. 9 rebounds, the 4 steals. He was -5 in a 13-point loss, so that's obviously pretty good. Yeah, he played really well. 40 minutes is a lot for him, but he has to carry that usage. And like I said, his production, scoring-wise, dropped off during the game, but it was because of the way that Phoenix was handling him, not because of the way he was playing. I thought he was pretty good in this game. So yeah, we'll leave it there for now. That was the gist of the things on this Thursday into Friday. I'm recording this podcast now post 2 a.m., so my apologies if I say anything out of line here or whatever, but I am quite tired. It's been a long West Coast trip for everybody, including folks like me who are at home, but also staying up late to cover all of these games. From here, the Hawks are back home on Saturday, which would be a welcome thing for everybody involved, I would imagine. They actually begin a 5-game homestand beginning on Saturday with a game against the Hornets. Of course, the Hawks are actually 0-2 against the Hornets this year, but still a favorable matchup in a lot of ways. Charlotte is not good, and it's pretty favorable on the whole, so that's a spot where the Hawks could be favored despite being so short-handed. We'll see on that one. I'll have a podcast after the game, as I always would. Please subscribe to this show anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. If you are an audio-only listener, you will also see some post-cast episodes from Locked On Sports Atlanta. Folks, that's a good podcast to sort of add to this one. Different voices, but all on the same audio-only feeds, and nothing less from me ever. I'm still recording my usual allotment of content, but just some extra stuff on the audio feeds. Please leave 5-star ratings and reviews. Please share the podcast, like it on YouTube, auto-download the podcast on multiple platforms if you want to support the show. Also follow us on Twitter, at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. Please also follow my written content at patreon.com/BT Rowland, where I also share some audio clips usually on that platform. And thanks for listening, everybody. I really do appreciate it, especially those who were staying up late listening to these podcasts when they drop, but also folks that had to go to sleep. I understand that totally. Hopefully these podcasts can help you get through catching up on the West Coast trip before you can start watching some games again as the Hawks return home to a more normal time slot beginning on Saturday. All right, that's it for me on this Thursday into Friday, and we'll see you all next time.